Welcome, Anthony. It's a pleasure to have you on our show.
Thanks for having me on.
Great. Well, I wanted to get started a little bit about the article in and of itself. So can you share with our listeners what inspired you to write this article?
Sure. Requesting information seems to be one of those areas of audit planning that's often overlooked when considering how to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of an audit. It typically is delegated down to a low-level staff member, and it's really not something that's thought about until it comes around to the start of field work and you realize you don't have a lot of the information that you need to actually start field work. But it's one of those areas where it's actually your first contact with the auditee and can really set the tone for the audit. And it's really worth spending the extra time to get this step right. In my article, I talk about a better approach to requesting information that improves efficiency and the effectiveness of the audit and really enables questions to get answered faster, and it also enables you to build a better relationship with folks in the business.
Yeah, and I often see, like you stated earlier, that request is typically done at the lower level staff positions. It's kind of like, here's the audit objective or the goal. Here's what the activity we're going to be, needing, or the evidence that we need to collect, and then we make a big assumption. The staff actually knows how to craft the language that's appropriate to meet that core objective, and then you get into fieldwork testing, and then people are like, well, what about this? What about that? In order to gather substantial evidence. And it is. I mean, let's say 80% of it's pretty much accurate or complete, but then you've got this missing gap where you could be annoying other people when they say, well, why wasn't that requested in the beginning? You follow, or, why are you coming back to me for something that you should have thought about, I don't know, in the planning stage of the project? So I enjoyed the article because it was, I know it was in the section called, I think it was called Back to Basics in that area of the IIA magazine. And it's a good refresher because often we get so complacent and then we forget about some of those best practice items that we should be thinking about, even if it is delegated to our staff. And I wanted to hone in on another point, which is kind of a hot issue this year in particular, about transitioning to the new COSO framework. And I know you discussed in the article about, the request of information from your auditee or your client can impact the quality of the audit, but can you share with our audience some of the tips when you're requesting information? For example, if you need more documentation, let's say if you're transitioning to the new COSO framework.
Yeah, whether you're transitioning to COSO 2013 or performing any other type of audit, I mean, there are a few things that you should consider. One thing I did suggest in the article is utilizing more of those face-to-face type of meetings in order to improve the efficiency and the effectiveness. One of the things with COSO 2013 is the big thing is, you need to validate that the control is not only present but functioning. And so in order to do that, you need to request a lot more information than maybe you previously did. So if you do it in a face-to-face meeting, you're going to do a couple things. One, people seem to view meetings a little more positively than they do an email request that simply just adds to their to-do list. And we implemented this about a year ago, this process that I wrote about and we're talking about today. And we're surprised by a lot of the results, but people seem to be much more willing to spend 30 minutes with you up front than you spending 30 minutes later on sending follow-up emails and almost nagging the auditees to get the information to you. And so those face-to-face meetings have really been critical and crucial to getting good information, but you also learn a lot more about that particular area than you otherwise would have in an email exchange. The second tip that I'll mention is, make sure that you are getting making the right request. I've I almost hate to say it, but I've had too many experiences in the past where you actually request the wrong information, and you go in and you make your request, and it's not exactly what you thought it was. the benefit to these face-to-face meetings, it eliminates a lot of that, and you're able to make some of these changes real time, opposed to having to sending an apologizing email later on. Mm-hmm. And then one of the other, I guess the last tip I'll mention here is make sure you know what you're requesting. You need to have a solid understanding of not only the audit step, but the audit objective and the associated risks. It's not uncommon to walk into one of these meetings and just get thrown a curveball, which makes your original request irrelevant. But if you know the audit objective and the risk, you can make that change on the fly and get back on track without too much delay.
Yeah, I've often asked our staff, see last year's work papers as a clue, but I want you to be able to answer the question, what does this answer? What question does this answer? So if it's a purchase order, what question are we trying to answer here related to the risk or the control objective, et cetera? And it gets them in a problem-solving mode where they're thinking about the goal of what that evidence is trying to achieve. You follow? So, it's just another pattern or another viewpoint to take away. But you're right. What is it that you are requesting? And then if you do have prior year work papers, I've noticed that people sometimes just copy and paste and they aren't thinking about the actual situation or the actual goal. And when you ask them, okay, well, what does this really tell us? I'm not trying to put people, on the hot seat, but it's getting them to think critically to say, is this even the right information to answer the question that we need to get answered? So it makes them think rather than just assume this is just the proper way to get the information and just let's copy and paste what we did last year. And I love the better versus the traditional approach, which I wanted to get into. Can you share with us, the better approach to requesting information versus the traditional approach?
Yes. So the traditional approach, at least in my experience, is you send out a PBC list or document request list, and you basically sit around, wait for the due dates to go past, and then you start making phone calls and sending voicemails, and finally you use the last resort. You kind of go knock on their office door and force them and twist their arm and give you information you need so you can just start your field work. But that kind of, like I said earlier, that really sets the tone for the whole audit, because it's basically your first contact. So, it's really kind of a bad approach, because that's the first time you're dealing with them, is to take that kind of arm twisting approach. So the method or the better approach that I suggest in my article is to, just initially schedule a meeting up front with them. It's only going to take 30 minutes of your time. It sounds like it's really going to be a time-consuming process, but it's really, the benefits are really worth it. So basically, you schedule a meeting, meet with them, describe what you're looking for, describe what you're trying to do. And we found that, if you do that, the auditee really has kind of a better sense of really what you're doing, and really kind of appreciates that extra, background information on what it is you're looking for. Some of the other key benefits that we've seen, if you do make a bad request, I think we've all been in a situation where, maybe you request something like the vendor setup form from the AR manager, when it really should have been requested from the AP manager. You can kind of make those changes, kind of in real time, opposed to having to kind of, wait a week for them to identify that it was a bad request, send it back to you, and then you send it back and had to wait another week for them to look at it again. It's just a much more more efficient process to do it that way. The other thing is you really gain a better understanding of the process when you're sitting there talking to the person about what it is you're requesting. Just last week, we actually had a good experience that kind of illustrates this. Is we were sitting with one of our group controllers, and we're discussing one of our internal controls. And this control had been in place for a couple of years. And we were sitting down with him just talking about it, and he's like, guys, this is really a lousy control. He's like, yes, it works and it kind of meets it, but it's really just, kind of a lousy control. There's a better control kind of later on, or actually earlier in the process, that I think would meet and would really address the risk better. And we looked into it, and he was absolutely right. But if we didn't have that conversation with him, because the control was in fact operating fine, we would have never really taken that second look at it. So it was good for us to sit with him and for him to basically give us his opinion on what he thought the control was doing, which is not something we typically would have asked him. But since we were sitting there, he felt he could express his opinion to us. The other thing that we like about these meetings is typically at the end of the meeting, after we've already made a request and they've given us the information about, where it's located or what we can look at or just handed it to us, we tend to ask some questions, like how's business going, how are sales, or, how's the new, software you just implemented, or how's the new quality manager working out. And by doing that, we just gain, while it may not relate exactly to the audit we're doing at the time, it gives us some additional background information about the business. And it may, something may pop up where we kind of make a note, we want to look into this later, So it just gives us that extra information. But the most important thing I like about this new approach is it really helps us build stronger relationships with folks, in the businesses. And that's what really helps improve audit planning, is knowing this additional information, because we have these relationships. It's I would say, a couple times a week, somebody from the business calls me up and asks my opinion on something, whether it be a compliance topic or something, audit related. They just ask my opinion on something because they know, that, I have a relationship with them. They can call me up. They can ask me a question, and, they can do the right thing from the start, opposed to me having to come back and identifying it later on during an audit.